All right, welcome to our New York Giants Preservation Society meeting for today, Thursday, April 20th, 2023. We have the legendary sports writer Jerry Izenberg joining us tonight to talk about his brand new book, which I will be discussing in a second. In the future, we have the great Dan Taylor, who will be talking about baseball at the Abyss next week. We can't wait for that. And then May will be all about Willie Mays. It'll be May's month. We have guest speakers lined up for the first 3 weeks in May. And then we will take a Memorial Day break. And we have guests in June, July, and August. I'm a little thin right now. Wish I was thin physically. When I say thin, I just haven't scheduled. We have people lined up. We just gotta, I have to commit to them, and we're all good basically until October and November. So the meetings will keep on coming, and all of them will be very, very relevant to the Giants, both New York and San Francisco. But today we have just an extra special treat with Jerry Izenberg. Jerry, many of the New Yorkers will remember him from Sports Extra with Bill Mazer on Channel 5 here in New York for a very, very long time. He attended most every Super Bowl just until recently, knows everything about boxing. Currently, he's residing in Las Vegas. His new book is just out. Here's the cover of it. It's called Baseball, Nazis, and NEDICKS Hot Dogs. So without any further ado, I'd like to present Jerry Izenberg. Jerry, welcome to the New York Giants Preservation Society.
Well, it's a pleasure.
Welcome back.
It's a pleasure to be back. I'm delighted for the opportunity. The reason this is relevant, I mean, my life isn't much connected with it was when I was young with the Polo Grounds, but and even your group. But the reason I'm delighted to do this is my father is, those who may remember my last visit, my father was a minor league ball player, really low minors. And it was a dream denied all his life, but he couldn't be denied the Giants. And he sat on the corner, he had rules on our porch in Newark. He sat on one corner with a Philco radio. And on the other corner, my mother would sit with a rabbi named Joachim Prince, who later was the warm-up man for Martin Luther King on the mall at that major speech. And he bar mitzvahed me. And she would sit at the other end because she had kids she had me and my sister in Avon area grammar school, and I took his kids to school. So that was a connection, but they had to be soft no matter what. And every once in a while there'd be a tremendous crash. My father would hit the top of the Philco radio. Melot hit into a double play, or Carl Hubble threw a home run ball, and it was a disaster. But the rules were they couldn't say anything. One day the rabbi comes, he stepped on the porch, he says, "Harry, I got to talk to you." And my father says, "Not now. Melot is coming to bat. How can you interrupt me?" I am convinced that if the Messiah had actually come to 80 Shanley Avenue in Newark, New Jersey that night and said, "Harry, it's time. We got to have a little talk," my father would say, "Yeah, wait a minute. Melot is coming up to hit." Anyway, he's finally, when it was over, he said to my father said to him, "Well, what do you want?" And he said, "Well, I want you to teach me baseball." And my father looked at him. Now, asking my father to talk about baseball was like giving my first wife a valid credit card. I mean, he was thrilled. But he said, "I didn't think you cared." And the rabbi said, "I don't. But I got out of Germany 2 days before the knock on their door. My kids are here. They're American. I got 2 boys. I just want to be able to relate to them with baseball the way I see you relating to Jerry." And the Giants lived in my house. It just went on. And, we had 2 baseball teams we rooted for. My father said, "You root for the New York Giants." So my sister did. I did. My mother quietly did, but she didn't care about baseball at all. The other team was the Newark Bears of Newark, New Jersey. They were voted the greatest minor league franchise in history. They won the 1937 international pennant by 25 and a half games. Went to play Columbus in the Little World Series, and everybody said, no one's going to go to see that. We better play the first 3 games in Newark because this team was so good. Well, they lost the first 3 games. They went out there. They had to play against Musial. They had to play against the Walker brothers. They had to play against Terry Moore. Anyway, they won 4 straight. And they came home in the town. At that time, there were 400,000 people. It went crazy. And Jacob Rupert tried everything out in Newark. And the Yankees didn't have lights until the lights worked in Newark. That's the way it worked. He was so thrilled by that. He brought the whole team over to New York. They had a big banquet, and it went on. The town went nuts about that. So I rooted for the Bears because the first baseball game I saw was 7. My father took me to the game. It was pretty good. The mayor threw out the first ball, and I said, why are they booing him? Isn't he a Bears fan? And my father said, listen, kid, they're booing him because he's the mayor. You better understand that. I learned about life through baseball too as a result of that. It was a wonderful time, but my father suffered. Oh, he suffered. You got to remember, Bill Terry in 1937, world champions, right? The next world championship is 1951. My father could tell you about Leon the Cat Treadway, Tookie Gilbert, all names that are not listed anywhere else except in very old, faded newspapers. And we suffered to it night after night after night. He imbued in me, one day you're going to win. And I discovered something for myself. He didn't tell me because I don't think he realized it. We were the only team, of course, as you all know, only town that had 3 major league teams, right? Well, the Yankee fans, they were all Wall Street type guys, It was like rooting for General Motors, well, they got to fight for, they won all the time. And on top of that, the one segment of Newark that rooted for the Yankees were the Italian Americans because of a guy named DiMaggio. And it was like isolated. The rest, yeah, because he was.
She'll be here about 7:20. I said joy here. She said yay.
Because he was their hero. Now, most people, then you had the Dodger fans. Well, the Dodger fans were simply certifiably insane. I mean, that was that simple. That explained the connection and everything else. I remember as a kid, an umpire named Major Kurth, former football player, big guy, was calling balls and strikes. 1950. Giants were making moves like maybe they could win a pennant, but this is the end of the year. It's the Phillies and the Dodgers. And suddenly, a Dodger is called out at home plate. A guy runs out of the stands and decks Major Kurth with a right hook. Major Kurth. Now they're fighting and cops are running. People are running. And I found out later on, the guy was not a Dodger fan. He was part of a pickpocket gang. And when they had the distraction, people ran through the stands lifting wallets. And that's a true story. So Dodger fans were nuts. Now the Giant fans, I understood because I understood my father. The Giant fans were all like Job in the Bible. Look, I believe. So give me the biggest wrestler you have. Throw the snakes at me. Give me boils. I don't care. I know we're going to win. One day we're going to win. My father kept telling me that, and I never believed him until 1951. Now I'm getting ready to graduate college. I'm going to go to Korea. I'm working at nights on the desk at the Star Ledger. And I sneak out of the paper to go to a bar around the corner from Rutgers, Newark, where I graduated. And the name of the bar was The Place. And it was the place that night. I'm suffering. At home, my father is suffering because Don Newcomb is throwing aspirin tablets at the Giants. They can't do a thing. It gets darker and darker. And the future looks darker and darker because I know My mother was angry at me. She didn't like the girl I was dating, and she's given my father hell over it. And on top of all that, now he's got to sit there and watch his dreams so close, and it's going down the sewer. And then things happen, and I don't have to tell any of you what happened. Suddenly, years later, I got a chance to talk to Bobby Thompson about this. If you remember, Leo calls him over just before he goes to bat. And I asked him, what did he tell you? He said to me, Bobby, if you ever hit a home run, now is the time to do it. And I said to him, come on, Leo, they're better than us. You might as well realize it. While this is happening, they changed pitchers. He didn't even know that Branco was pitching until after the first pitch was right down the middle. And everybody on the Giant bench groans. There's a ball thrown in his wheelhouse. They need a home run. And he stands here because he's trying to figure out who's pitching. Now comes the second pitch. After that, I don't have to tell you anything. The next day, my paper ran a picture of a guy in the left field grandstand at the Polo Grounds, throwing his beer in the air at the exact moment when it happens. And I'm laughing because I'm drinking beer at the bar and I did the exact same thing. And the only thing I cared about, I knew I was going overseas, and I ran to the we had payphone. I know you guys are old enough to remember. You might even remember Marconi, if you're like as old as I am. But I ran into the payphone booth, called my father, and he's yelling, and I'm yelling, and neither one of us understood a damn word we were saying. That was the highlight of his life. And years later, when the Dodgers and the Giants left town, of course, he never forgave them. And when he was a shut-in by then. He had like 30 heart attacks. He worked in a dye house, and the more he inhaled the fumes, was killing him. Well, what am I going to do? I got nothing to do. I said, well, turn on the television. The Yankees are playing. He looked at me and he said, you want me to watch the Yankees? I'll never see those bastards. No. And look what Giants and Dodgers did to me. Forget them. And it was really a sacrifice to give up baseball. I think baseball kept him alive because he didn't live a lot longer, once they left town. But all through this book, which is about my growing up, certain things fascinated me. I'm in the 4th grade and I'm sitting next to Junior Hofdick. And out of the corner of my eye, I'm watching her because she always wore Angora sweaters to school. And I'm saying to myself, so what are those bumps in the sweater? What do they mean? I go to my mother and I say, listen, I got to ask you a question. She says, go ask your father. I can't answer that. I go ask my father and he says, go ask your mother. I said, I just did. And then I realized what those bumps were. He wouldn't tell me. She suffered from some incurable disease that they did not want to discuss with me. But I'm proud to say 3 years later, I found that not from June, but I found out exactly what those bumps meant. And you follow me in this book. The wonderful thing about this book is Newark was, we had 400,000 people, it's hard to believe, living in Newark in those days. And Newark was the biggest factory town in America. Everybody worked in a factory. And therefore, Newark was an ethnic like New York, but we didn't have boroughs. So the whole town, the Greeks lived here, the Brazilians lived there, the Jews lived here, the Italians lived there. But there was no difference between them all. They didn't understand it, but everybody was the same. Because when I wrote my novel, I told this story, and of course it was fake, but I took a quote from my father. And I put it in the mouth of an Italian father telling his Italian son, if a girl is in trouble, it's your problem. And if it's your sister, break his neck. And I had no problem translating that or moving that from one end of the city to the other, because every ethnic city was alike. Hey, all our homes, what was the most important room in our homes? What was the kitchen? What happened in the kitchen? Late at night, there talks about finances, discipline the kids, And the visitors, they didn't play card games in the living room. We didn't have a dining room. They played card games in the kitchen. Why? Because in the Italian homes, well, and in the black homes, and in the Jewish homes, all the living rooms were covered in slip covers, furniture. So what happened? In the Italian homes, the parish priest came and was invited to sit in the living room, and only him. In the black homes, the teachers came and they were invited to sit in the living room. And the thing is, when we had the riot, which I covered, nobody realized that all these people were the same. But it took them a long, long time to get over it. This book covers the first 21 years of my life. And so many things happened that really, I think, happened to everybody. A friend of mine who, well, an acquaintance of mine called me the other day because he wants me to write a column about Cleon Jones, who is in the middle of restoring a town called Africa Town in Alabama, where the last slave ship docked. And Cleon grew up there. It's a good column. And so he called me to say he had finished the book, and he said, I don't understand what happened in Newark, because I came from Queens and I think you stole this. All this happened in Queens, didn't happen in Newark. It happened to everybody our age if you lived in the metropolitan area. And you guys will enjoy it. I know you will. But we're here. But as I said, one more thing. Everybody's in the book. Babe Barna, who I'm sure some of you heard of. And I mentioned Tookie Gilbert and all those guys. And then my father brightened up finally one year. Johnny Mize came over from St. Louis and hit home runs. And it was a novelty for the Giants. And they led the league. They were fourth in the standings, but they led the league in home runs. I got to tell you one more Giant story. So I'm 12 years old. My old man says, what are you doing Saturday? And I said, well, I'm playing baseball. And he said, no, you're not. I said, I didn't do anything. Well, why are you punishing me? He said, I'm not punishing you. I'm doing you the biggest favor of your life. Don't ask me. Shut up. We're going to New York Saturday. So we get on the bus. We ride 2 buses. Now I get on my subway for the first time. And we stop at the polo grounds. And there's this long set of stairs going up, and I can see cracks of daylight ahead of it, right? And then, and now I've heard about the polo grounds all 7 or 8, or 10 years of my life. And as I walk up the steps, the light is getting brighter and brighter. And there it is. I expected to hear organ music. He's taking me to the cathedral, the place he dreamed about coming out of the dugout and running on the field with. And they were playing the Cincinnati Reds. And 2 things happened. Billy Jervis, the Giant shortstop, disagreed with the umpire about a home run he hit, which the umpire claimed was foul. And so he spit tobacco juice at the umpire. And so I never got him to play a full game. He was gone. The other thing happened is the Giants won the game. My father was absolutely a boulevardier with his stories and songs going home on the subway and then the buses. That was a high point. It's really the only Giant game we went to together. But I thought about him at many Giant games as I got older. Bobby Rowan. Does anybody remember Bobby Rowan? I didn't think so. Utility infielder, batting average 157, 212, something like that. Dodgers are in the pennant race. The Giants are where they always are, last place. Bobby Rowan comes in as a pinch hitter in the first game of a doubleheader. And the Giants have 2 guys on base. And Johnny Allen, side armor, is pitching for the Dodgers. Bobby Rowan hits the first pitch. It's a cheap fly ball, but this is the Polo Grounds. And it lands in the first row, like 250 some odd feet away. And after the game, Johnny Allen says, I can't believe this. I can urinate over that wall from home plate, and this guy hit a home run there. But but it's a costly game, and it hurt the Giants. Anytime the Dodgers were hurt, my father was happy, and I was happy. And my dad did a funny thing that made me so proud of him. In 1947, he tells me, "Did you read the paper today?" He said, "No." He said, "Well, the Dodgers signed a black man. His name is Robinson, and he's coming to play." And he said to me, "How do you feel about that?" I said, "Well, if he's a Dodger, I don't like him." And my father said, "No, I mean, how do you feel about him, sir?" I said, "I haven't heard that stuff." That's what he said. "I have. From now on, we will root against the Dodgers, but we will root for Jackie to get 2 hits." And I said to him, "Why do you feel that way?" He said, "I'm going to tell you." See, my father had a skin of right here between the thumb and the index finger, a white patch. No, nothing grew there. I mean, no hair, no skin coloring, nothing. And a great dated. Every time I asked my dad what it was, he'd say, "Baseball souvenir. Don't worry about it." So the last minor league baseball game he played was up in Binghamton, New York, and they won. And he knew he was finished with baseball. And he and the second baseman and one of the pitchers went out, and it got very wet that night, which is, I understand it because my father didn't drink, so I guess he didn't handle it well. Anyway, they wound up in a tattoo parlor. Now, my dad's telling me this story for the first time because we're arguing. I'm telling him, "I'm not going to Hebrew school. I'm not going. I'm going to play baseball after school. I go to school 5 days a week." He said, "You're going to Hebrew school." Back and forth. Now he's telling me why I'm going, and he's telling me the story about this white patch. And he said, "I don't know what happened, but when I woke up in the morning, there's a little animal, tiny, tattooed right there." Now, in those days, a lot of rabbis believed that according to the commandments, "Thou shalt not have any graven images above me," or any graven images. There was a belief that if you had a tattoo, you couldn't be buried in a Jewish cemetery. And it wasn't so, but a lot of Jews believed it. My father's on the train, and he's saying, I mean, he's living with his mother. He's the last one at home, 7 kids. He's taking care of her, and he says, "Do my kid. She sees my hand, I'm dead. She'll hit me with a frying pan. I'll be finished." He gets off the train and goes to a drugstore, and he buys a bottle of acid, and he burned it off of his hand. And he said, "That spot is why you're going to go to Hebrew school after school, because these are bad times here in America." And he was right. It was 1942, very bad time. He said, "And if you want to be something else, no one's going to let you be it anyway. You better find out who you are." And I said to him, "How did you come with this philosophy?" He said, "It's not philosophy. It's the truth." He said, there was a time he came here in 1880. Not many Jews were playing baseball. And it was one year he was the only Jew in his league. And he said to me, "I ducked too many balls thrown behind my head because the reflex action is pulled back. Too many times I ducked those balls. You're never going to hear those names in this house again, ever. And if I hear it from you, you're never going to say it again." So, baseball taught him a lot, and baseball taught me a lot. And the Giants taught me one thing. The Giants taught me, whatever my father wanted, I loved him, and that's what I wanted. And he taught me patience. So we waited till 1951, but it was absolutely great. And when he found out that in my business, I knew Bobby Thompson, he went nuts. Let me bore you with one more thing, and I hope I'm not boring you. Carl Hubble. My father said, "You're not playing baseball that Saturday." Got to New York. That was the second. I was wrong. That was the second Giant game I went to. Giants, Dodgers. Well, as all of you know, they'd sell out those games, and more Dodger fans than Giants. Giant fans were still waiting for the millennium to come and bring them a championship. But Dodger fans only had 32,000 seats. And so it was like a mass migration when they played at the Polo Grounds. They all got on the subway, they all came. Standing room only, sold out. My father says, that's okay. Give me 2 standing room tickets. He buys 2 standing room tickets. Now we're walking up the ramps to find a place to stand. Suddenly he stops. He says, this is where we're going to watch. I can't see anything but the pictures, man. He says to me, that's exactly what I want you to see. You're going to see something you may never see again in your life. This is the next to the last year, and Carl Hubble is now pitching with his brain, not his arm. The fadeaway doesn't fade. He's having trouble. And the last year, he was the only year he was his last year, and the following year, only year he didn't win more games than he lost. So I'm looking at Hubble, and my father's just talking to me, and all I can see is Hubble. He pitches 4 brilliant innings. In the 5th inning, they beat the crap out of him. Balls are flying all over the ballpark. And Mellott is the manager, and he comes to take Carl Hubble out of the game. I thought my father would be upset, but he wasn't. My father puts his arm around me. He says, watch this man walk off the field and understand something. You will never see a better left-handed pitcher in your life, and you may never see, you didn't know Koufax was coming to the Dodgers. You may never see as good a left-hander the rest of your life. This is his day to remember. This is a player to remember, and I don't want you ever to forget it. It was a great experience for me because the last thing baseball taught me was that with all the insanity and all the emotion, we don't have emotion today. We don't have fans today. We don't have people who understand the game. We don't, and we have television where they show which celebrity is sitting in the crowd. But I learned baseball from my father, and it was the best teacher I could have had. Hubble is walking off the field. Mellott has put his arm around Hubble's shoulder. They're walking to the dugout. Well, they're walking back to the dugout. He didn't go to the dressing room. And suddenly, the entire crowd, which has more Dodger fans than Giant fans, is on its feet in a standing ovation. And I think what my father told me, the Dodger fans as well as the Giant fans realized, if they ever saw Hubble again, it wasn't be the Carl Hubble they knew. It was a great moment in my life. Listen, you can ask me any questions about anything you want.
Jerry, that was fabulous. All right, here's the name of the book again, Baseball Nazis and NEDICKS Hot Dogs. Jerry, what's the best way to get the book?
Okay. You don't even have to remember the name. Go to Amazon, go to books, type in my name, Jerry with a J, last name I, Z as in zebra, E-N, B as in boy, E-R-G. Type in my name. I've done 15 books, about 12 book covers will pop up. The first book cover to pop up will be my dad and me walking down the street on that cover you just showed. All you got to do is, if you buy the soft cover, there's no hardcover. I insisted we not do a hardcover. I want more people to read this book, and I want them to keep it. So a soft cover you get for about 18 bucks, something like that. But I want to tell you, I promise you, everybody listening to me, if you don't get at least 3 hysterical laughs a chapter, I'll give you your money back. And I don't expect to have to do it.
Jerry, you want to explain where you came up with the title?
Yes. My father ran a supper table. That was his pulpit. That was his platform. And so he had rules. He had rules for everything. There are only 2 subjects that were acceptable to talk about at dinner: the New York Giants and the Nazis. We lived 10 blocks away from the Irvington-Newark border. The New Jersey headquarters of the German-American Bund was in Irvington. Every time people crossed that border, a lot of strange things happened. It was a very tough time in America. People just blinded with hate, and it made no sense. And fear. As a matter of fact, I got to tell you, speaking of fear, NEDICKS Hot Dogs I'll get to. Speaking of fear, my father he had a tough time. He worked 6.5 days a week until I was about 10 or 11. You know, I was born 1930. The Depression just was taking off. And he's listening to the radio, and a priest named Father Coughlin, who was called the radio priest of the air, was preaching. And because in all the houses, in all the ethnic houses, the radio was always on in the kitchen. And we always ate supper in the kitchen, of course. So my Father Coughlin's on, and he's saying, it's Wall Street. Wall Street's the reason you have to line up to try to get jobs. Wall Street's why you're out of work. So my father said to my mother, you know, the guy's starting to make sense. I'm going to send him $3. That was a big nut for my father. He sent him $3. Next Sunday, the radio's on, and he hears, I told you about Wall Street. Now I'm going to tell you why. It's the Jews. It's the Jews. It's the Jews. And my father, he had just picked up his coffee cup, throws it at the wall, breaks it a million pieces. And he turns to my mother and he says, that mumser, which means bastard in Yiddish. That mumser. He said, I sent that man $3 last week. And my mother says, and it's a true story, my mother says, you think maybe we could get a refund? That's a true story. And that was the kind of fear that motivated. A lot of people don't know. Lewis and Schmeling, 1938, June. Well, Roosevelt said Lewis was fighting for America. And that wasn't true because I knew Joe later on when I got into business. Joe was fighting because Schmeling hit him on the chin and knocked him out the first time. And everybody said Schmeling was a Nazi, was coming over to him. He was not a Nazi. So much not a Nazi that they put him in the front lines and dropped him out of an airplane in Crete where he broke his ankle. And that was the end of his war. But everybody thought that's what it was about. And what really increased the tension, and I mean, New York was the same, I'm sure. Listen, Newark was like being born in New York. There was only a river between. That was the only difference. And the morning of that fight, 22 German Americans, not Germans, German Americans, were arrested as spies for Nazi Germany. The Daily News put out an extra, and you can imagine the emotion at that fight. My father says that he violated his own rule. He never spoke about boxers. He said, tonight, everybody's staying up for the fight. Everybody's sitting in the living room behind a big radio. We're going to listen to the fight. And he said, this colored guy, because in those days, that was the vernacular. This colored guy is fighting for his people, and he's fighting for us, too. And the other guy's a Nazi, so we're going to stay there. All right, so we go in the living room, my sister, my mother. My mother's trying hard not to get up and walk out, but she doesn't want to anger my father, who never loses his temper with it normally. The fight starts. My father is on his feet. He's throwing punches. I'm on my feet. I'm throwing punches. He's cursing. I try to curse. My mother goes, language, language, language. So I watch the rest of the fight. 35 years later, I'm in an all-black town of Grambling, Louisiana, with Grambling University. I was the first white guy ever to go to the Grambling campus. Great football. So I'm talking to a guy who runs the men's store, Calvin Wilkerson. And we're talking about boxing and Lewis for some reason. And I tell him this story. And he said, you know, I had the same feeling. I watched that fight in Gallows Barbershop around the corner in the back room with the radio. And he said, when your father stood up throwing punches, was he cursing? And I said, only every fourth word. And he said, me too. He said, but your father could do what he wanted after the fight. We couldn't leave the barbershop because the Klan was out then. And we slept on the floor in the back room of the barbershop. He said, but I never met your dad, but I'll tell you one thing. That he's a white man, I'm a black man. That night we were brothers under the skin. Never forgot that. There's a lot of myths about it and everything else, but the sports has changed. It used to bring people together. It really did. No matter how mad you were, it brought you together. I remember the Jersey City Giants are playing the Newark Bears. One of the rare games my father and I got a chance to go to before he died. And near the end, it's a doubleheader. And in the International League, the second game of a doubleheader is 7 innings in those days. And there's a guy pitching for the Jersey City Giants. That's a Giants farm club, but I couldn't bring myself to root for them. Giants and the Bears were my team in Newark, right? Okay, so my dad, he said, well, I'll go with you. A guy named Crip Poli, P-O-L-I, is pitching the second game for Jersey City. And he's a journeyman. You know, he was up with the Phillies a little bit and down, but he's been around a long time. The morning of the game, I don't know this, my father, and I didn't know it till years after the game. His daughter was diagnosed as terminally ill and will die in about 2 weeks. And the manager says, go home. And he says, no, let me pitch. I got to keep my mind off it. He pitches a no-hitter, 7-inning no-hitter. And my dad, the total Giant fan, is rooting against the Giants farm team. We had never seen a no-hitter. And Crip Poli gave us a 7-inning no-hitter. It was like a gift, like a going-away gift, because my dad never saw another Bear game. My dad never saw another Giant game in person. And I never forgot it. And it was, to me, just totally amazing. I didn't see another no-hitter again until a fellow named Larson pitched in the World Series, and I was then a newspaper guy. And, you know, baseball, I shared so much from my dad in baseball. And that's why I was willing to learn from him. He taught me lessons without raising his voice. One day he says to me, not a baseball story, but I got to tell you, because I love that guy, and he's still in my life, in my mind, and I got to tell his story. I'm 10 years old. He says, go out and sweep the sidewalk. I thought he was kidding me. I didn't realize he swept the sidewalk every weekend. Well, he paid $6,000 for that house. All the windows were broken. The stairs were collapsing, but he bought it, and it was the first house, the only house he ever owned. And he would do that because everybody in the block was just like him. They weren't proud of the little, this is 1940. We're a year away from the war. The Depression has still got America by the throat. And these people were proud of their little homes, right? So I go out and I get a broom and I'm sweeping whatever on the sidewalk into the gutter. I know I'm doing something wrong. He's standing there behind me with his arms folded, not saying a word. And I know I'm going to find out what I'm doing wrong, but I keep on going. He said, where are you going now? I said, well, I'm going to go play baseball. He said, no, you're not. No, you're not. You know where the garbage cans are? They're behind the house. This is not the Izenberg garbage. This is the Newark City garbage. This is the Izenberg garbage. You go back and get a dustbin. I don't care if you have to make 50 trips. It all goes in the garbage bin. And I say to him, why? And he says to me, I think it's in the book, he says to me, well, I'll tell you what, I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to put my hands on you. I'm going to tell you why. So for as long as you live under my roof and eat meals that I pay for and sleep in a bed that I bought, this is going to be the answer. When I tell you to do something, no matter how old you are, as long as you're living here, and you say why. There used to be all of the saloons. You didn't call them bars. There were saloons in those days. They were like the working man's fraternity clubs in those days. And he said all the saloons had free lunch. Hard-boiled egg, ham, stale bread maybe, but you got it free because the beer and the alcohol paid anyway. And then one day they said, you know, people are going to keep coming here. Why do we do this? So one by one they stopped. He looked at me and he said, the last bar in the whole metropolitan area is a saloon. To have a free lunch was the White Rose Bar. He said, and you know what? The White Rose Bar is closed. Ain't no free lunch left in America. Pick up the damn garbage and put it where it belongs. And I was kind of a snotty kid, and all through my growing up time till I left for the service, if I questioned him about anything, he'd say, White Rose Bar is closed, go do it.
Jerry, when did your father pass?
1958.
What was his reaction to them actually winning the World Series?
To what?
Winning the World Series in '54.
54. I was just home getting discharged. So I really can't. Oh, I tell you what it was. Yeah, no. I was going out with this girl of a different faith. My mother was hysterical. And she was a good woman, but it really was the way she was raised. And she would try to get me, don't make it serious, you know. And one day she said to me, look what you're doing to your father. Look what you're doing to your father. And my father said, he ain't doing nothing to me. I loved you, I married you. He loved somebody else, he married somebody else. What do you want from me? He always took my side. I remember a girl was sending me, I was 15, girl was 18 and I was 15 years old. And she was corresponding with me. And in those days, I'm sure everybody here got an envelope like this from somebody they had affection for. Kissing, a lipstick kiss on the back of the envelope. My mother has to investigate. It's the summer, I'm working, I'm coming home, I'm a high school kid. And I see her standing on she was a very overweight woman. She's standing on a kitchen stool holding this envelope up to the light. And I look at the edge of it and it looks a little brown. I'm saying, she could steam the sweater open. And she said to me, I said, what are you doing up there? She said, oh, this came for you. I want to give it to you. I said, don't you think it'd be easier to give it to me if you got down from the stool? She gets down and she hands me the envelope. She looked, she had read it, they returned it. She said, O'Brien, that's not a Jewish name, is it? Is it? I said, only on the day every Jew and Muslim converts in the state of New Jersey. And just then my father walks through the door and he knows what's going on. And he looks at her and he says, let the boy breathe. Social intercourse is not sexual intercourse. And that ain't too bad for a fourth grade dropout.
Bill Clank, you're up.
Thank you very much, Jerry. You bring back great memories for
But
many
that's
of us.
what I hope and can.
Well, I mean, about our parents
Yeah.
and baseball. For me, the greatest memories were my mom and dad taking me to Candlestick Park, and maybe Norm and other guys here have the same. But this photo, that's my dad. And I'm the kid on the far left. And, squirrely little kid, first row, Candlestick Park, first game. The first camera I ever owned, it's a Brownie, and my mother took the picture. You're going to get this picture out of my dead, cold hands.
Yeah, well,
Nobody's
I
taking this away.
can understand it. I was there at Candlestick Park when the guy blew off the mound. The wind blew the guy off the mound and called it a balk. It's an all-star game.
I got to ask you a real
Sure.
couple of questions about your days at the Ledger Star. How long were you there? What was your time frame?
No. I still am. I'm 92. I'm
Oh,
still
you're still there.
writing.
Okay,
The answer is 72 years. Except
Did
for
you know a guy in the 70s and 80s who worked on the desk by the name of Steve Hurt, H-E-R-Z?
K-U-R-Z, you said?
H is in Henry, E is in Edward, R is in Ralph, Z is in zebra.
I think I did because I went, when I came back from the service, I went to the Ledger briefly, and then I went to the Herald Tribune.
Right.
And I was there for 2.5 years. When I came back, and I was out in the service for a little over 2 years. Deduct that, 68 of my years were spent at the Star Ledger.
Okay.
I'm sure I knew the guy.
The Star Ledger ran possibly the greatest comic headline ever 50 years ago this April. And I'll do my best to repeat it. Steve passed it on to me. But think about this one. They showed the picture and the headline, the main headline on the the backside of the Star Ledger was "Headless Man Found in Topless Bar."
Post, New York Post.
You're
Was that
absolutely
the
right. It
Post?
was the Post. It was the Post. I
It
was
was
in
the
the,
Post. It wasn't
yeah,
the Ledger.
but I was syndicated in the Post, so it's, it's
That was the
legitimate.
Post.
Yeah, but it was the New York Post, absolutely. Well,
It's a
that,
wonderful headline
well,
with the
and-
picture.
well, I'll tell you what else they did at the Post. Murdoch at that time was back in town. A fellow that I don't have much respect for, though I did take his money when they syndicated it. And he had a headline. He walked in the office to visit at the Post. And he got all excited because there was a story about a woman who had a disease and was going to die. She was 8 months pregnant. And they thought they could save her. If they turned off the whatever she was on, the baby dies, but she gets saved. Murdoch says, I'll write the headline on that. And he was just a headline grabber. And he wrote, "Don't turn off my mommy's machine. I want my baby brother." I don't even know if the kid could talk. And I'm going to tell you a story about Murdoch. I know this for a fact. There was a guy named George Viles who was his right-hand guy. Circulation. Murdoch inherited a newspaper in Australia from his father. That's how we started. It was a terrible newspaper. Topless women on the. I mean, it was just. I'm not against topless women, but it was just. It was disgusting, you know. And they had four corners, just like Times Square or Board Market in Newark, and they had this guy owned a newsstand, a wooden newsstand, right on each corner. He wouldn't put Murdoch's paper out for display. You wanted it, you asked for it, he reached under the counter, he sold it to you. George Viles, he said, "George, I want you to clean that up." This is typical Murdoch way. Nothing he does surprises me. So George Viles rented a bulldozer. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, he went down to the four corners. And the next morning, when all the newsies came in, there were no newsstands. End of the competition. That's the kind of guy he was. I don't admire it, but it's an interesting story. It's an interesting story. But I'll tell you, you know, one of the things I did, and I know it doesn't matter what you thought because everybody had reasons for what they thought. I was the first guy in America to defend Ali before Coach even knew who he was. They broke out my car windows with sledgehammers. And we got over 4,000. I was syndicated in about 80 papers, and I used to be a pretty good writer then. And they sent me about 4,000 or 5,000 letters forwarded to me. None of them agreed with me. I think one agreed, and the guy I always told people, the guy wrote, "I'm sorry, but in the place where I am, they only let me have crayons. They don't give me sharp pencils." And he agreed with me. And in fact, another aspect of it was I remember I used to get most of those letters. I told them, stop forwarding them. I don't want to see them. I don't care. But, and so I get letters from some of those same type people today whenever I happen to get into a political thing. That's okay. I probably saved their wife from a beating. They could write me a letter, get it off their chest. But a lot of the letters had one thing in common. The headline always said, the salutation, "Dear Jew bastard." And it was always signed a U.S. Army veteran. Well, no, it didn't bother me. But I was in the same army, and this guy, and so we won. Can you imagine how ludicrous this was? But anyway, I thought about it, and then Ali and I had an argument. One argument in all those years I knew, 50 years. And it was something that he said and did, and I took him a task in the paper. And now I started getting letters from the other side. They used to write, "Dear commie Jew bastard." Now I got, "Dear fascist Jew bastard." And I remember getting an award for the boxers writings, and I remember saying, "Look," I told them the story about the letters, and I said, "Anybody who can make the left and the right agree on 2 out of 3 things deserves an award."
Let's go to Mars. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Mars. Norm, go
Okay,
ahead.
yeah,
Go ahead,
I'm
Mark.
with you now. Thanks, Jerry, for joining us. That was
I love
very
it.
interesting stroll down memory lane there. I wanted to ask you, comparing when the Giants and Dodgers left to what goes on in baseball today. What I'm noticing is new stadiums don't necessarily draw people. Like I was watching the Giants against the Marlins, and there seemed to be flies in there. So if the teams aren't competitive, even with a new stadium, that brings us back to when the Giants and Dodgers left. The Giants only drew 600,000 their last 2 years. What was your take on, so let's say Horace Stoneham trying to relocate the Giants, possibly to New Jersey, like the Giants and Jets, and still calling them New York? Or do you think that there were any efforts made, and was there
No,
any backlash?
I'll tell you what I think. And I say think it's based on what I know, but it's not 100% accurate because I don't know. I don't think there ever was an attempt by Stoneham to go to New Jersey. The guy who wanted to relocate originally was O'Malley. He authorized an architect to draw up a stadium with a roof on it. There weren't any. It was gonna be in Westchester, I believe, originally. And then he was gonna put it in the Brooklyn railroad area. When he decided to go, he knew he couldn't go by himself. And Horace, like you said, was doing flies. And O'Malley played on that, and he said, you'll always have a monopoly. The entertainment dollar will not be chased out there the way it is here. You're not going to LA, I'll go there. You're going, but we can keep our rivalry the same way. And Stoneham went. And I'll tell you something Stoneham said, and I was there at the time. Charlie Finley planned to move to Louisville, Kentucky. And he didn't. He wound up eventually, obviously, in Oakland. And when the Giants and Dodgers moved, the National League had to have a meeting to approve, make sure the damages were paid to the San Francisco Shields and also to clear the way. And one of the things Horace said is because O'Malley was a super salesman. And Horace said, you can't put this team in Oakland. You cannot do it. And somebody said, why are you so convinced? He said, because O'Malley promised me no other team could come out. Which, because he believed O'Malley. Hey, anybody who believed O'Malley was wound up in trouble. People think O'Malley did it because he got credit for being a great humanitarian, but he did it because he knew he was going to get a bigger ballpark. He hoped to stay there, and he wanted more asses in the seats. Horace signed, one of my best friends was Monty Irvin. Actually, my two best friends in New Jersey were Monty Irvin and Larry Doby. And I'm working on a book on Larry Doby now. And Monty, when Monty came there, it was interesting. The Dodgers beat the rap about the color line simply by what they did was they signed him to Montreal. So he didn't have to go down to South or most of the farm clubs. Secondly, they kept hammering in the newspaper, he'll be a Dodger next year. So there was a kind of acceptance. We can't stop this. This is from the bad guy. We can't. So what can we do? It's one guy. Doby, the manager didn't want Doby. 25 players and 3 coaches, and only 5 guys shook his hand when he got into the locker room. The Giants did it the right way. Leo was the manager. Now, I was not a fan of Leo's about a number of things. Which if you got a little time, I'll tell you another Leo story after this. But anyway, he had a way of, when he wanted to do something, he was going to do it. Everybody looks up in the locker room. There are no blacks on it. And there is standing Monty Irvin and Hank Thompson. And Leo says, he knows how he's going to do this. give me your attention for a second, guys. Just 1 second, please. The guy on the right of me is Monty Irvin. He may wind up being the best hitter this organization ever had. The guy on the left of me can play 5 positions. I fully expect to win a pennant within, and he did, within 2 years with these guys in the lineup. So if you don't like it, you can go fuck yourself. That's all he said. Absolutely nobody complained. I mean, it was done so simply and so casually. They laughed and he walked away. And Monty was my favorite Giant of all time. And my father's listening. I have to apologize about Mel Ott and Carl Hubble, but Monty was my buddy for so many years. Great player and so versatile. When he played for I saw the Newark Eagles, the black team in Newark. When he played for them, it was 410 feet to center field. He could throw without a relay guy. He could throw, and on 2 bounces, he threw it home plate. But he hurt his arm in his service, and that part was gone. He was marvelous, really marvelous. And I'm sorry, right?
Norm, we want to go to you?
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Eisenberg.
No,
Wonderful.
my name is Jerry, please.
Oh, then thank you very much,
Or the
Jerry.
real Mr. Eisenberg reached down and slapped the crap out of both of us.
Well, and that's what I want to hear more about. I was wondering what your father would say about Harry Danning and about Willie Mays.
Oh, God. Well, Harry Danning, there were 3 guys during the bad years that my father did nothing but talk about. Harry Danning, Harry Feldman, and who's the third one? There was a when Weintraub came up for a short stay with them, Bill Weintraub. He rooted for them actually because they're Jewish, but that is an outgrowth of something else. 1938, when I told you about Lewis and Schmeling, something else happened that year. Hank Greenberg. And my father, and they didn't play night games then. 38. My father just hung on Hank Greenberg. And he got to 58 home runs. And my father constantly told me when he didn't get, they walked him 10 times in the last 15 games. And he said, anti-Semitism. Well, later on, when I grew up and saw the whole world and was in this business, I told him one day, I said, Dad, you steered me wrong on that. It never occurred to you that no pitcher wants to be the man who threw the 60th home run ball, and he was only 2 away, because they would be linked with him forever. Maris and Tracy Stoller, and that was the real, but my father lived and died with Hank Greenberg. He never forgave the Giants. He said they were in competition with the Yankees. They both wanted a Jewish ball player to fill the ballpark. This guy was playing under their noses, and they let him get away. And but he was a fan of those 3 guys. In answer to your question, particularly Sid Gordon. Sid Gordon was more versatile.
Thank you, Norm. Thank you. Howard, you're up.
How you doing, Jerry?
Oh, pretty good now.
Good. I have a Giants comment, but first I want to tell you that I had the misfortune of working for Rupert Murdoch twice.
Oh,
I worked for him in the New York Post, late 70s.
yeah.
So I was there with that headline. Plus when there was a mafia guy killed with a cigar in his mouth. And you might remember that one too, down in Greenwich Village, I believe. But I was in the advertising department, and we were all freaking out because those kind of headlines took business away from us. I mean, Murdoch was destroying Dorothy Schiff's liberal newspaper.
It's all he ever knew. It's all he ever knew. Look,
Yeah, it was, but we advertising guys were really, the pressure was on us from
Oh,
the.
I know that. I know that.
And it was, many friends resigned, the unions went berserk. And then I went to work for the Chicago Sun-Times a few years later in their New York City sales office. So I had Murdoch again. Murdoch purchased the Times, the Sun-Times. He was gone within a year, I think. There was the cross ownership rule back then with TV, as you probably know.
Yeah.
And of course, you worked for Metro Media, right, before they became Fox. So
Well,
you,
that was after I left. You know, I was
that
in
was
my
at the, okay, so you
career.
missed Murdoch.
I had, but I left earlier.
Okay, yeah,
Actually,
about
actually,
1980 or so.
yeah, I
So
got fired.
so I had this Murdoch connection twice, and I actually once rode up the elevator with him alone, and I was scared shitless.
Uh,
It was like it was in the New York Post building down on South Street, and
oh yeah.
it was awful.
Well,
The Giants comment I want to make has to do
yes.
really more with my father. As a kid, he lived up in Washington Heights,
Mhm.
and he always cut school, went to the Polo Grounds. And I mean, his favorites were Mel Ott and Hubble, whom you mentioned, Bill Terry. And then many, many years later, he took me to my first Met game at the Polo Grounds, that weekend series against the Giants in June of '62. We were all Willie Mays fans. We were Giant fans. I was only 4 years old when the Giants had played their last game in New York, and I really don't have any
Yeah.
memories of it. But for most of the '60s, I rooted for the Mets and for the
Yeah.
Giants, and then I eventually went over to the Mets. And by '69, and by the time Willie was traded, of course, by then I was strictly a Met fan. But I have a little nostalgic feeling for them still. You know, I watch a game. I've been to Candlestick. I froze my butt off. It was in August, an August night game,
Yeah.
and I had to wear a winter coat. And finally, in 2013, I was out there on vacation with my wife. First time in my life, in person, I saw a Giant Dodger game. And the Giants won 4-2. And that was a down year for the Giants. 2013, that was the odd year. They were winning the even years.
Yeah.
At least I saw them beat the Dodgers in person in my lifetime. So now I can rest in peace. Plus, if the Rangers win another Stanley
Well,
Cup, I can.
somebody asked me, I agree with that. Somebody asked me about baseball fans today. I was out in Dodger Stadium, and Koufax is pitching against the Giants. I think it was the Giants, but he's pitching. I remember being there. And it's a no-hitter. And the Giants have moved there recently. I mean, like 2 years earlier. And it's the seventh inning, and everybody gets up. And I said, where are they going? They said, oh, they got to beat the traffic out here. So they're leaving now. It's a no-hitter in the seventh inning, and they left. Don't tell me about that rivalry for me is dead, because those fans are not, Giant fans were willing to take the pain and the suffering, just hopefully to get to that 1 year, 2 years as in my lifetime. And Dodger fans, they would take anything anyway because they were Dodger fans. I want to tell you one more story about Leo, if we have enough time. Leo takes a job as third base coach with the Dodgers. And his whole job, you know, he's Leo. He's there to stab Walter Olson in the back and get the job in some fashion, some way, because that's Leo. So they're playing the Mets in the old Polo Grounds. And the Mets have lost something like 13, 15 games in a row. I don't know how many. And they're playing a twilight doubleheader with the Dodgers. And in those days, I was with the Tribune. In those days, we had to write early stories. It was a silly tradition. You're writing a story, people are watching the game, they pick up the paper, and they know who won the game. You're writing a story, you don't know who won the game. You got to find something to write about that won't offend them, but might tell them. They stopped that from now on. Anyway, I got to do an early story, so I said, let me go to the Dodger clubhouse. I'll talk to somebody. The Dodgers are taking batting practice, but Leo, I was looking for him, really. I walk in, climb those stairs, walk in, and Leo looks at me and he says, I think I'm going, and grabs his heart and falls on the floor. I don't know what to do. I get this little guy. He was a Japanese guy, very small. He was a clubhouse guy with them. We pick up Leo and put him on a rubbing table. And the guy says to me, go get Walter, go get Walter. Okay. I was never in shape when I was in shape. I'm running from center field to the Polo Grounds to home plate where the Dodgers are taking batting practice. And I went up to Walter. He says, what are you, crazy? Not now. I said, Leo collapsed. Well, Walter Olson was always in shape. He's running back to center field. I'm thinking, if Leo's going to die, I'm going to get there in time somehow. And I'm running and panting after him. I'm staggering up the steps. I get in, and now there's three other newspaper guys, and I'm pissed off. I shoulder my way in. and I'm standing by Leo's head. Austin is by the feet, and he says, gets up on an elbow and he says, Walter, Walter. Leo is very dramatic. Walter, come here. And Walter walks around and leans over. He says, what is it, Leo? What can I do for you? He said, if we lose the first game, tell the guys to win the second one for Leo. This is a team that needs a dying man's curse on their head. They've lost 15 straight games, right? And he says, I will. And the next day, I remember my first line. It's incredible to believe, but the Dodgers won one for the Jipper. That's a true story. And what happened, I won't tell you what it was. We'll call it appendicitis, but you can't catch appendicitis. So what it was an overdose of penicillin. For you, figure it out.
Dave Littman, you're up.
Okay, Jerry, I want to thank you for joining us. More importantly, I want to thank you.
Ooh,
I'm sure you recognize this.
I do.
It's autographed. I reached out through when I was covering the Yankees in the late 80s. I reached out through some folks I was working with. I'm not sure if it was Joe Durso or Jack Lang or one of those guys.
I knew those guys, yeah.
Knew well. And they shipped it to you and you signed it. And it's one of my most precious possessions is having a signed copy of it. It's a terrific book and I tremendously enjoy it. The question I have for you, I've been in the journalism game myself for 47 years. I covered the Yankees and the Mets. You know, I work with a lot of the elite guys that you work with. Now the people I see, last 25 years, I've been doing PR for the city of Newark, New Jersey.
Really?
And the people I see now, they are stupid. It's like they can't write a lead. They don't know who Nikita Khrushchev it was. They don't know who Winston Churchill was. And I find the same thing seems to be true in baseball. They can't tell me who Fred Merkle was. I'm wondering what the hell is going wrong in training journalists, and what would you, as a guy who knows this stuff colder than any living human being, what's your advice to teach these young people to at least do their jobs properly?
Well, first I'll tell you the cause of this, all right? We have been raised, you know, I like to think my family's an exception because I raised my kids to know what the world is about. We have raised 2 or 3 generations that are totally lacking in intellectual curiosity, period. That means don't tell them what happened 10 years ago. They're not interested in what happened last Thursday. So there's no connection with reality. Number 2, everybody, I say everybody, but I mean everybody. There's just very few exceptions. Everybody who goes into this business goes into it to get out and get in television, to get FaceTime. That's what they all want. I won't talk about anybody because it's not my nature, but yeah, I'm thinking of a couple of guys who made a living out of screaming at people on television. And that's what television wants, scream, controversy. It isn't controversy. If I tell you a lie about you and I scream at you, to me, that's just a lie that I'm trying to make come true. The problem in teaching them is almost impossible. Colleges are very much responsible. They now don't have, very few of them have journalism courses. They have what they call communications majors. And they teach you about how to write on the internet, or mechanically. They don't teach anything about what to write. They teach you about how to get a job in television. They teach you a lot about public relations, and they throw in newspaper. Hey, look, I understand. I'm not going to write this book. I've thought about it for a long time. Before I go, and I'm 92 now, I've got this Dobie book I'm working on, which is very close to my heart. And then I've got another 3 or 4 I want to try to do that can hang around long enough. So I can't waste time on this. And there's no point helping people who are unhelpable, if there is such a word. But if I wrote a book about what happened, it would be called Autopsy, Death by Suicide, the End of American Newspapers. They gave in to the internet, they panicked. You can't, look, I try to tell, I used to do a lot of speaking. Well, you know, I used to do a lot of speaking, I used to get a lot of money for speaking. Now when I talk, people went out of their room because I'm an old man. But I used to speak to a lot of young kids in colleges. And I wouldn't waste my time doing it now. I mean, there's nothing you can tell them. They know. They are the hope of the future. And I'm an eternal optimist. I belong, this book that I hope you will buy and read. In the front of it, there's a thing called My Family's Rules of Order. And the first one is Jewish optimism. God willing, if we live long enough, we'll go to town Wednesday. And if not, we'll go Friday. That's why I'm still optimistic that we're going to come out of this. But we'll never be the same. Television could have been the greatest instrument of all time. I had an editor, not a sports editor, but an editor of the paper, who told me, I'm furious with you. You're writing about the World Series and you're mentioning what time it's on television. I said, yeah. He said, they're trying to bury us. I said, no, you're trying to bury you. I want them on television. I don't have to tell anybody who won the game. I can pick the most pivotal moment of the game and I can write about that now because they know who won the game. We should have used it as a tool. We didn't. Now they're trying to become, they got little tiny cameras here. They got guys that do everything but shove a broom up his ass to sweep the floor while he's doing everything else. I'm very discouraged about it. And it is endemic to the entire business. It's not something that came only to sports. You just can't. Rupert Murdoch's influence was tremendous because a number of people want to get on there so they can yell at you and tell you a lie. As far as the newspapers go, we just don't do the job anymore. I will say this. When I had my war going on over Ali, because I believe that constitutionally what he did was correct. You know, it was correct up until the Supreme Court then got him off the hook. But he didn't break any law, and he wasn't convicted of breaking any law. Anyway, when that happened, the guy who owned our papers, the Newhouse family owned the paper, and they were not great fighters for labor laws, but Donald, who had the ledger, was. He was fabulous. I never had to contribute to my 401k. Donald did. I mean, he just was marvelous. And I speak to him now once every 2 or 3 weeks. But I didn't know to this day whether he agreed with or disagreed with what I was doing with Ali. I went to him and I said, Donald, I believe in this because I believe in the Constitution. And I believe I'm a little bit left of center, but I really believe that we're just ignoring human rights. So I'm going to keep doing this. If you want me to stop doing it, you can fire me, or I'll quit if you want me to, but I'm not going to give up. And he said to me, look, I run the paper, you run your column. I don't know to this day whether you agree with me or not, but that objectiveness and that understanding what newspapers should be is gone. I can't name anybody who has it.
Thanks, Dave. Paul Ellis, you're up. Paul?
Yep. Hi, Jerry. Thank you so much. I want to question.
You're breaking up.
What's that?
You were breaking up.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Jerry, I wanted to ask you a question about Mo Berg.
Sure.
When did people find out exactly when he was working for the U.S. government? Was it during baseball, or and how long after? If not,
what was after World War II? But as far as Mo went, I knew Mo very well because Mo went to Mets and Yankees games, and they were never on the same day. And I was always there, and and he lived in East Orange, and he always waited around, and I knew he wanted me to drive him home to East Orange because I had to go to New Jersey. So I got to know him very well. And I remember he went to Washington, and Paul Hurwitz, a really good writer who worked for the, and a semi-pro catcher who worked for the Newark News, told me about the time he was on a train going to Washington, and Mo was carrying a gun. He opened his coat and he saw the gun. And he didn't know what it was about, and I asked Mo what it was about. And he told me a little bit about the OSS days, and he said, they insist I still carry it. And I don't want to, but they insist I did. You know, Mo went to the roof of a hospital in 1940. He was with the Senators, and he was with an all-star team that went to Tokyo. And he filmed, a little tiny camera, he filmed Tokyo, different parts of it from that movie. And that was part of his OSS training, and I guess it became the CIA. And he was a guy who, you know, he spoke 9 languages. And he was a guy kept to himself, never had a girlfriend, never. The movie was wrong about that. And was a guy who, he made a job for himself because he could speak all those languages. When they opened it up to Latin players, Mo kept his job with the Washington Senators because Griffith was so cheap, he was signing those guys for peanuts, and somebody had to be able to speak to him. And then at the end, he went to Boston, they signed a couple, and he was up there because he could communicate. It didn't come out till much later. I stumbled into something. Some people know it, most people don't. You remember the name Alice Marble, tennis player? World War II, just around that time. And she was a pioneer in women's tennis before any of them. And she worked for the OSS. And she told me, I want to call him about it. She told me how she was, I don't want to say she was a loose woman. She enjoyed sex, is the way I'll put it. And she had a lover who was a German, and he was living in Switzerland, spying for Nazi Germany. And they said, we want you to go back and play an exhibition tour through Switzerland and Italy, and meet this guy again and get in his house. And she did, and she slept with him, and she photographed documents. Actually, they had in those days, even then, they had a camera about that big. And he went to a fair, and she said he had a headache, she wasn't going to go. And as she was walking out the door, she saw his car coming up. She jumped in hers and took off. And he chased her because he knew something was wrong. The ice and the snow in Switzerland. And she got away, and they got her out. Guy's name was, I can't remember his name, who was the head of the OSS. It's an Irish
Alan
name.
Dulles.
Say it again.
Alan Dulles was the head of the OSS, and I think you're talking about Aline, the Countess of Romanones. She married a Spanish count and became Aline, the Countess of Romanones. I got a book about her.
Well, anyway, this guy signed up a lot of sports figures to work in the OSS because he felt they could be trusted. Mo told me about parachuting into Sicily.
Wild Bill Donovan, he was the head of the OSS. Right?
He's the guy I'm thinking.
Wild Bill Donovan, yeah, that's right.
That's the guy. And Mo told me about, he was told that they sent these guys to set up a base camp in Sicily to help prepare for the invasion of Italy. And that's where they brought the mafia into it. And these guys parachuted in, they gave them a lot of gold. Then it was radio shot, nothing but radio shot. They sent Mo in to parachute in and find out what happened to the gold and whatever. And his instructions were kill them if the gold was gone. And he never told me beyond the fact that he wouldn't tell me what the result was, which leads me to suspect he followed instructions, but I really don't know that as a fact. He was an interesting guy, and he was a talented guy, not only intellectually, but he was a pretty good baseball player, just couldn't hit, and he became a bullpen catcher, and then he became a coach.
Thank you, Paul. Jason, you're up. Last one.
All right, thank you. Jerry, you had mentioned that you're good friends with Monty and Larry Doby.
Oh, yeah.
I was wondering if you have any stories that you could share about their time with the Eagles.
Oh, yeah. Many a time I was, I cut school indiscriminately. I was an equal opportunity cutter. If the Eagles were home or the Bears were home, it didn't make any difference. They were both playing in Rupert Stadium, and I was going to be there. I think I set the indoor armory record for truancy when I was an 11-year-old, and I went there, and I saw them play. They were the double play combination. They were infielders, and when Doby got to Cleveland, well, the shortstop was Woodrow. And the second baseman was an old hero of mine who played for the Newark Eagles called Joe Gordon, 13-time All-Star. Where were they going to play Doby? Beck never thought about that. And a guy named McKechnie said to him, he later became manager, Hall of Famer. He was a pitching coach with the Indians. And he said to Larry, you're not going to make this team next year. Larry only hit like 200, 194 or something. He only played in 29 games. They used him as a pinch hitter and a pinch runner. Woodrow didn't like him, didn't want him. And he said, you can make this team. You can hit. I wouldn't want to pitch against you. You got to do is go home, learn to play the outfield. Do that, and I guarantee you'll make this team. There are no outfielders any good on it. And Woodrow will have to give you a chance. And Doby went home. It's in my book. Doby went home that winter and hired 2 high school kids. And they hit him fungos in the snow at Patterson Eastside High School. And then he bought a book to really refine his outfielding knowledge. The book is How I Play Right Field for the Yankees by Tommy Henrik. Whoever wrote the book never played an inning of baseball in his life, but And he came back and they reluctantly tried him in right field, and then they tried him in left field. And he opened the season in center field. And I say this about Larry as an outfielder. There was an all-star game when he started as the center fielder and Mantle played left field. And Monty, as far as Monty went, I'll tell you a story about Monty. Beck was the only guy who paid for these players. O'Malley, the great humanitarian, he stole Don Newcomb, he stole Jackie Robinson, he stole Roy Cannella from the Philadelphia Stars, Roy Campanella. He stole everybody. He wanted Monty Irvin. He went to Mrs. Manley, Abe Manley owned the team. He married her, Effa Manley. Abe didn't like contracts. Abe didn't like arguments. All Abe wanted to do was go to semi-pro games and sign guys who would be stars in the league. That's what he wanted out of life. He didn't manage it. She then was a general manager. O'Malley comes to her and says he wants money. And she said, you guys are going to put us out of business. And I can live with that. But you're not going to do it and bankrupt me at the same time. You'll have to pay me $15,000 if you want money. And he said, I'm not doing that. You're holding up your race. That was the great humanitarian. So he called a press conference of all the black newspapers. They never got invited to press conferences. And at the press conference, he announced, Effa Manley is standing in the way of the black race between the major leagues. Well, he then called Horace and he said, we could have a hell of a rivalry if you'd sign one of those guys. And Horace said, who would I? He said, there's a guy named Monty Irvin, plays in Newark. You can get him. You can get him for $15,000 Horace had to pay. Now, Monty said to her, Miss Manley, I was always loyal. When you wouldn't give me a $25 raise, I jumped to Mexico, played 2 years down there. Then I went into service. And when I came home, I came back to the Eagles. I was there. And he wanted to raise just to get married. And she said, well, Monty, well, I'm very happy for you now. And he said, I think I should get a piece of that sales price. I mean, you know, I came back and I was in the service. I stuck it out in Mexico. I mean, can't you give me some of it? And she said, well, Monty, I'll tell you. There's a guy in town, white guy, who's our team lawyer. And we owe him $7,500 in legal fees. And I really, really think we should pay him. Don't you? And Monty, being Monty, said, yeah, you should if you owe him the money. But you still got $7,500 left. And she said, I want to tell you about that. There's a furrier on Halsey Street in Newark. I never had a fur coat. And there's a mink stole there. And I can get that for $7,500. Or I can give it to you. But I really want that for you. What do you think I should do? Monty said, well, give it, go buy the mink stole. 30 years go by. In an oil company in Kentucky had a guy working for them who played in the Negro National League. So they're going to have a birthday reunion in his honor. And they bring back all these black players, right? And one of them is Monty. And as he's standing there having a drink, talking to somebody, Ray Dandridge, I believe, in comes Mrs. Manley, and she makes, you know, she came late on purpose. She makes a spectacular entry. And Miss Manley, you look beautiful. How are you? Well, Monty, I'm pretty good, you know. And Monty, you see this coat I'm wearing? This is the fur coat I bought with your money, with the money that we could have given to you. And he said, well, I'm out of I'm working for the commissioner now. And he said, I'll tell you, you deserve, and he stood up all these years. You don't owe that coat a single thing. He said, no, but I thought Stoneham owes me a lot more money for you. Monty was the gentlest athlete I ever knew, and the most concerned. He was just, and his relationship with Mays was genuine. He was told, you don't have to live with him, but you have to guide him. And he found the boarding house that Mays lived in. When he was playing stickball in the street with the kids, he found that house. And he spent a lot of time with him. And he would tell him things like, don't go out and drink with that guy. We'll be sorry if you do. Because Monty said it, he never said why. And if you remember, there was a great picture in all the newspapers, Denver, Colorado, a game against the Denver Bears or whoever they were, I forget their name, the American Association, exhibition. Monty slides in the third and breaks his leg. And Willie Mays is crouching next to him crying. And that was genuine. That was genuine. Monty was so good, I'm going to tell you. You all remember 54, I'm sure, you know. And you remember a guy who came along called Dusty Rhodes. And you remember what he did. He did it, though, at the cost of Monty Irving. Monty was benched for every game but one. And because he hit the one in the first game, you know, and that solidified it. And Monty absolutely applauded everything Rhodes did in that series. There was a great, he was a team player. And he thanked, I think he was waiting, no, either he or Willie was in the on-deck circle with Thompson at the home. One of you guys must know who.
Mays.
Who?
Mays.
Yeah. Irvin was followed Mays in the lineup, or he was on base. I don't think he was on base.
Irvin made out. Mays was on.
He did make out. Okay.
But Jerry.
Yeah.
Lastly, before we wrap it up,
I'd like to tell you, before you go though, I'll do whatever you want. I'd like to tell you one more story if I can.
yeah, just you did not mention where the NEDICKS hot dogs came in.
Oh, the NEDICKS was the biggest they made the hot dog popular. All 5 boroughs had NEDICKS all over. And Newark had NEDICKS all over. And North Jersey had NEDICKS all over. And when you went to Madison Square Garden, the lobby on the old garden, 58th Street, the old garden had a NEDICKS in the lobby when you went to the ticket window. And Marty Glickman broadcast the Knicks games. And every time a Knick made a foul shot,
Good luck,
NEDICKS was a sponsor. So we said, good like NEDICKS. And it really meant a lot. That's where the NEDICKS came from. And it came from that picture on the cover. My
Nice.
father said to me, we're going Saturday to the Newsreel Theater. I was 8 years old. You see, I'm wearing knickers and the thing and long stockings. And he said, we're going to the Newsreel Theater. I said, well, you know, I don't really want to go. He said, you're going. The reason we're going because it was 2 weeks after the German-American Bund held a rally in Madison Square Garden. 19,000 people, 14,000 of them in stormtrooper uniforms. And he wanted me to see it. I was the only kid in New Jersey, my sister too, who knew what the Reichstag was, who knew where it was, and who knew that who burned it was Hitler. And he wanted me to know this. We get down there. My father, as I said before, was wounded in World War I. And when we came out, he said to me, those mumsers, those bastards. He said, I helped stop them in 1917. Somebody's got to stop them now. And I said to him, like an 8-year-old would, but they're in Germany. And he said to me, they're here, and you better remember that. But I did, if you got one more moment, I'd like to tell you a quick story about my baseball goddess.
Can I get one word in there when you're done? Okay.
Yeah, I have a very quick question, very quick.
Well, somebody, who's talking?
Frank, go, Frank.
Yeah, what do you know about Monty Irvin's unsuccessful candidacy for the New York Jersey legislature? And if he won, how could he have served during the baseball season?
His work was, I had a little trouble understanding. I think it's the microphone.
Monty Irvin was a candidate for election to the New Jersey legislature,
Yeah.
and he lost. And well, I'd like to know more about it. What do you know about it?
Well, all I know is it was New Jersey, and if you know New Jersey politics, I will tell you this. The State House gave me a day when I moved out here. And I told them, I said, they were always joint session. I told them, I said, you're not kidding me. I know what you're doing. You want to make sure I'm going. But I said, I know New Jersey politics, and I can make you a promise. I can come back here and vote for every single one of you next year. That's where Monty was. He didn't have machine help. And in those days, you couldn't win anything without them.
And how could he have served? How could he have served if he won and had played baseball at the same time?
Well, you'd have to ask Monty that. How could I answer that? You know, and that's
All right, Howard, quickly, go ahead,
Okay,
Howard.
very quick. Jerry, I was just wondering if you knew my brother, Steve Manis. He covered the Mets for the Morristown Daily Record in the early 70s. He also did the Knicks and the Rangers, Knicks and the Jets.
I think I did. I know the name, and I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, because he told me he spoke to you at one or two occasions. He
Well,
was at the Morristown Daily Record.
If he was there, I'm sure I knew him. But
Yeah, the mid-70s, mid to late 70s.
But if we have time, Gary, I don't know. Do you have enough time? I want to tell one quick story about it.
Go ahead, Jerry.
Okay, I'm 8 years old. I'm at a Newark Bears game. I sneak in because you could do anything in those days. And the whole deal was you could sneak into the bleachers during the week. And that's when I went because I cut school. What happened, I wasn't 8, I was 11. I was 11 years old. And if you stayed in the bleachers, they left you alone because they never had the place full in the weekday. The idea was if you sneaked into the grandstand, they threw you out. So I sneak into the grandstand one day and I find an old discarded program and a guy who I won't name because everybody on that team went to the majors is walking down toward the bullpen. And I was a snotty kid and I'm holding this scorecard with a pencil. I'm saying, come on, sign it. Will you please sign it, please? And he said, not today, not today. I didn't realize ball players are human beings. Sometimes they don't have sex the night before. Sometimes they got a bad stomach. They suffer from what everybody else suffers. And the guy said, not today, not today. Finally, he takes the thing, tears the program in half and throws it on the ground and keeps walking. I'm standing here biting my lip. I mean, if it was a Jersey City Giant, a Toronto man, but one of my guys, a North Bear, would do this to me when I root for them. A woman comes up and grabs me by the arm and she says, "Come with me." You're gonna throw me out of the ballpark. She takes me down to third baseline. There's a bunch of women sitting. She says, "You sit here with these ladies. I'll be right back." They turn out they were the Bears' wives. She goes down the steps, leans in the dugout, comes out with a baseball signed by all the Bears. Says to me, "This is yours. No player should talk to a little boy the way they spoke to you. Ladies, if you see him during the summer, I'm sure he's going to get in trouble again. Help him out." And the postscript is 30 some odd years later. She was George Sternweiss's wife, who led the American League in batting with the lowest average ever at that time during the war. And Sternweiss was killed when the railroad bridge in Hudson Bay in Newark Bay didn't go down, and he died. And I'm writing a column now about him and the wonderful woman in the baseball. She writes me a note that I can't read, and the nurse writes, she's got multiple sclerosis, but she wanted to try to write a note to you because she remembers you. Well, when I was writing a book about my early life, a different book, I knew he had a daughter, and I didn't know where she was, but I was trying to clear up whether she lived in Newark or I got to find a fact. She called me. She was a barmaid, and she called me, and she said, "Is this Mr. Izenberg?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "At last, we meet at last. The little boy with the baseball. My mother told me that story 1,000 times. And I was in love with Mrs. Sternweiss. I resented him for marrying her till I could grow up and marry her myself."
Great story, Jerry.
That's baseball.
Jerry, we cannot thank you enough one last time.
Sure.
The best way to get the book is through Amazon.
Amazon, go to books, type in my name. Don't type in the title. All these covers will come up, and the top cover will be this cover. And I said to you, 3 laughs a chapter, or you get your money back.
Let's all give it up for Jerry Izenberg.
Woo!
Jerry, you stay well. Great seeing you again, and we will talk soon. The rest of you, I'm going to close up shop, and we'll hang around for a little while longer to talk baseball.
We'll have a date next year when Dobie comes out.
Sounds great. Be well, everybody. See you next week with the great Dan Taylor.